So today I'm talking to abstract artist, abstract painter, Trudy Montgomery. And so like a lot of artists at the moment, I came across your work on Instagram during lockdown and really loved it. So it's nice to meet you in person. I think Zoom has to count as in person in
Yes.
these times, doesn't it? Yeah. So I think you studied, was it economics and political development?
Yes.
So not the obvious. I mean, it's quite interesting how many artists don't start in an obvious place. But so you started with something that doesn't sound terribly arty to start with.
No,
How did you go from economics and political development to a professional artist in 3 easy steps? Now, I mean, how did?
Yeah. It is a bit extraordinary. I actually gave up art at 13, and in excavating why my mother's an artist. She's a painter and very, very accomplished. And
right,
I remember feeling at 12, 13 that I would compare myself to the drawings and the things that she would do, and ridiculously compared myself with all the experience that she had and the practice, because it takes practice to draw. Like anyone can draw, but you do need to practice it. And I just made a decision that I wasn't going to be good enough at that, and so I shouldn't. So I gave up art, didn't do O-level even. And my father's in business, and so I kind of was pushed slightly towards economics, and had some brilliant teachers, and just followed that, and was interested in politics and philosophy, and ended up doing that at Exeter, and traveling to France and studying politics in France. way off track. And at I think 23 or 4, I just was like, no, I'm going to go and do a ski season. So I left my job in the city and went and cooked.
Chalet girl.
Yeah, and skied. And through that, I met somebody who then somebody's girlfriend who was starting up an office in London from an American software company, and they needed an office manager, and it was a bit of a step down from what I had been doing, but I guess I was capable, and I said, I'll do it. I'll learn the technology of what they were doing, because it was I had no idea about technology at that point, so I did a crash course basically. I tried to pick it up, but eventually then was moved to their head office in Silicon Valley near San Jose in San Francisco. So I jumped at that at 28. I thought, right, this is more exciting than anything.
Yeah.
And spent 10 years in San Francisco working in marketing and PR and analyst relations for software companies, and just absolutely having a ball. And it was the .com era, and everything was just exploding. It was very exciting, but art was rearing its head, and I would find myself talking to gallerists or artists and feeling this very uncomfortable feeling in my stomach that I just almost couldn't talk to them. It was just too painful, because it was really what I wanted to do. And through being on the West Coast, they're extremely the self-awareness movement, as I would call it, or personal development, was huge. So people were finding out about themselves, and I became very attracted in that, and did some personal development courses, which really shone a light bulb in the fact that a lot of who I was made up and wasn't really perhaps truly who I was. And so out of a course called Landmark Forum with Landmark Education, I decided that I would put on an art show and invite artists. I invited a jury to come and judge what would be people's slides in those days. It wasn't even JPEG images. It was, people had to make slides, and then I'd gather
quite a lot of other artists as well.
Yes, so I put out calls for entry, and with no experience really, I just kind of did it, and had people from the Bay Area, so Berkeley and Marin County and the San Francisco San Jose Bay Area, and we had hundreds of entries, and we would sift through them, and we put on an art show with so I had galleries and curators and people who would judge it for me. So I wasn't doing the curating part, and I rented a building and we did all of this, and it was just fantastic fun. And I called it Blue Tangerine Art, which I subsequently made into a limited company. My best friend was a lawyer, and she said, right, you need to do this properly, you're doing, it's going really well. And people would start to ask me how to find art, and because I realized that I would, at some point I realized that I had quite a memory, an image-based memory. I think it was slide reviews that I'd done in art history classes, and I could recall paintings that I'd seen in the Tate when I was 15 or 16, and early Mondrian, and you just wouldn't know that unless you could. Mondrian's work is very different to his early work, what he's known for. So I realized I could look at images and remember them, who they were by and where they were from. And so this kind of becoming an art consultant really stemmed from that, where you're kind of a personal shopper for art. You need to know where you're hunting, you're gathering art. And I was like, this is the most fun I've ever had. So
that sounds amazing fun.
So I would go into galleries and talk to the owners and sort of get to know what was in their back room, which artists they had, what their styles were. And so when I was presenting work to friends and clients, I'd say, well, and also perhaps with a little bit of psychology of knowing what kind of person they were. An architect would want a lot more straight lines than something that was very loose. And so that was an interesting side. And I would help present different artworks and paintings and sculptures and help them buy. Wow. Taking us permission to do this. So I kind of moonlighted for a while from my corporate job, and evenings and weekends, and I would do art consulting.
So were you painting all this time? So were you feeling, when you were looking at everyone else's work, oh, this is what I really want to do? Or had you sort of blocked that out, or how was that developing?
It was a subconscious desire to understand the artistic process. So I would love talking to the artists, and I'd go to their studios and be fascinated by what kind of mediums they were using and the brushwork and how they achieved various effects. And so I kind of gathered all that information and soaked it up. But it wasn't until later that I realized that actually I was looking for a certain type of painting that I was going to have to create, and that all along I had been kind of gathering information on how to be an artist. So it was a very rich background in terms of being an art consultant. Also the going to the art fairs and the galleries and the dealers and that side of the market, the kind of the commercial side, as well as exposing me to all sorts of art from all over the world that was gathered in New York or Miami or Basel. I just had this broad brush of what was out there and the different, very contemporary, like contemporaneous, what's actually happening now. And then getting this sense of, gosh, there's a whole lot of artwork that's very dark and very shocking, and these artists are kind of a little bit desperate to get your attention. But really, none of the sort of thing that I would want to really buy or have was out there. I couldn't see it. So it was only later that I realised, gosh, this has been an amazing training, and I've actually all the time been trying to, glean the information that I didn't, find anywhere else.
So when did you start to go from art consultant to putting brush or pen to paper, or actually starting to do your own work?
Yes, that was.
What was the turning point when it was sort of, do you know what? I'm going to have a go and do this.
Yes, no, it did take an epiphany. Actually, I was reading a book by Carolyn Miss called Soul Contracts, where she talks about archetypes. So. And of course, as I was promoting the artists in that time, I looked at the artist archetype. And the first line, it said, if you promote the arts, you are the artist archetype. And I was like, okay, that's it. And that sentence gave me permission to pick up a paintbrush.
Yeah.
So of course I went straight to my mother and I said, okay, teach me how to paint, how to mix a palette. And so I did. When I went back to England, she would teach me, and it's not easy. She was very patient. And I did classes with her teacher, Robin Child, who's an extraordinary, gifted and passionate teacher of art, and met, his students, and sort of started to immerse myself in that world as an artist, and looking at painting as an artist.
But did you know you wanted to be an abstract artist to start with, or did you just want to learn anything? How did you begin?
Yes, I think that was very much part of what I wanted to do. I had always done art history evening classes, even from when I was in London. So I had looked at a lot of art, and I was aware of the Impressionists and Cézanne, and all the way through. So I had a kind of a sense of the last couple of hundred years of art history. But really, what excited me was the modern artists, modernism, and
so any
the abstract expressionism. Yes, Franz Klein and the New York School in the 50s and 60s. Robert Motherwell, very gestural, abstract expressionism was what really excited me, and the colorists that were in England. So Howard Hodgkin, Sandra Blow, and now that I'm in Cornwall, obviously there's a huge emphasis on Patrick Heron, Terry Frost, but also Peter Lanyon is very kind of loose, expressive gesture that has been very Cornwall and St Ives based. So it's ironic that I'm now 10 miles away from St Ives, and that's infused in the landscape here.
Yes. I mean, it's such a great thing being in Cornwall, isn't it, as an artist? When did you move to Cornwall then? You were already an artist and then moved, or did it?
Yeah, so I became an artist while I was still in San Francisco, and eventually moved to LA, and there getting away from kind of the technology theme of San Francisco to the more artistic theme of LA, very broadly speaking. I kind of really spent a lot of time painting in LA, and even actually it was when the recession of 2008, 2009 happened, that's when I moved to LA, and I thought, right, I'm going to give myself 3 months, and rented a studio in the middle of a field, actually, in a beautiful Topanga Valley, and I just painted and painted. And so in 2009, 2010, it's interesting, I really created a lot of paintings, and stepping away from the English way of painting and Robin Child's, with that little bit of background, and I was continuing to do his classes, I then really experimented with, brighter colours, a bolder palette, saturated colour, and at scale, because that's what I was seeing. People have big walls in California, and they like colour, and so I just kind of went for it and had permission to do that. I was made redundant from my job because of the recession. So that's what I did with my time, and I was sort of experimenting with would I like to move to LA, and I just loved it. So I moved all my stuff down from San Francisco and immersed myself in making great big paintings, and didn't really look back. I did continue to do art consulting, and I did it a little bit more nationally at that point, as things got going. But I had time to paint as well as be an art consultant. So there was this kind of forced push into really going for it. And
sometimes you need a push rather than a leap. Yeah. Sometimes you need to be pushed rather than leap.
Leap, yes. But I did embrace it, and it was it was fantastic. And that, the intense sunlight, and can hold the colours, and really that palette hasn't left me, and I find that's where I really want to. So even coming back to Grey Skies, which I did in 2012 to get married to my husband, I kept having this very bright and bold palette and doing really big paintings.
Well, I was wondering that. So when you were starting to do a lot of painting in LA, how were those paintings, if they are different, or how yes, how is there any difference between that palette or that process and your process now? I mean, I'm assuming you've
I think I know,
developing
I mean,
it, but how would you see it developing and changing?
I look back on the paintings and some of them are, you know, they're immature and I didn't really know a great deal, or at least there's a difference between knowing it and hearing it in a class, you know, in an art course, and then actually being able to do it and integrate it. And there was this frustration of that gap. And I look at some of the work and I can see it's you know, it's a little bit too naive. But some of them I'm like, wow, actually that was really still holds up today. And I did eventually bring back all my paintings from storage in LA, and I've got them all here now. And
yes, some
of them are strong. They are really strong. So there was something happening in that very raw state that was allowing me to just kind of channel whatever it was that was coming through, and the simplification of shapes and symbols that arose in that early 2010, 2012 period that I'm still using now and going back to, and finding my way into the work. They find their way into my work.
So is that a deliberate thing, or do you just paint and then think, oh well, goodness, these are the symbols I'm using? Or do you think, okay, I'm trying to make a painting about something and then get that onto canvas? So which way round do you approach your work? I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so
I mean, how deliberate is it and how intuitive is it? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's definitely on the more intuitive end of the scale, I would say. I do start with some sketches, and I will, when I do get stuck, I will really, it's more of a kind of a design and a layout that I might, shapes that I might play with. But it's frustrating because you can't make a painting in a sketchbook as you would want it. So it's really just a jumping off point. And then I move to the canvas or the board, and I have to let go of those early sketches quite quickly, actually, because otherwise you're painting by numbers, and you're forcing an outcome, and you're making a painting rather than discovering or finding it. And it's in finding it that you can't really find it till the end of the process, but you have to go through it, and there's a period of chaos and really letting go into just responding to the previous gesture, color, you know, turning the canvas, making sure that, you know, it's kind of balanced in lights and darks, and all these things are going on at the same time as you're in it. And it might take it does take several painting sessions to, you know, you stop where you can't go any further, or you feel that you've messed it up, and then you have to kind of go through this struggle and frustration, and then you get a bit tight, and then you're like, oh, I really can't stand it now, and then you know, go back into it with fury and vigor, and that's often when a breakthrough will happen. So you're don't care anymore, and that's actually the best part, when you just can, you let go, and then the accidents, and you're being so forceful and vigorous, and that's when you can really push through into making a painting that, you know, is not the kind of painting that you know you can make, which is where it gets exciting.
When you're not being too cautious. Yeah.
Exactly, because a tentative brushstroke just looks unconvincing.
Painting, isn't it?
It's, you know, it's very unsatisfying. So you have to be bold, and you have to be assertive, and, you know, that freedom of just going for it is what really then you get through, and then you have a breakthrough, and then you create something that you didn't know you were going to create, and it's nothing like your sketch. And that's okay. That's what you want, is to, you know, push through into this whole new arena.
Do you then have a moment where you think, oh goodness, can I do it again?
You can never do it again.
No.
You can't do anything. But the process is, I've noticed that that pathway is the same.
Yeah.
You can't short circuit it. You can stop too early, and that I often find that I've done that, and I know you've got to keep pushing through. If you stop too early, you just, you know, it's a nice painting, and it's kind of you know, it may even be saleable, but it's not satisfying and it didn't challenge you, and what's the point really? So you've got to be willing to engage with that struggle.
But it is
I'm not interested in a comfortable life, you know, that comfortable,
yes,
comfortable as death, you know.
yes.
You know, that's not where the excitement lies, and you know, because you don't, and this is why I say art, and well, for me painting is a spiritual practice, because you're discovering yourself through that. You discover, gosh, I did something I didn't know that I could do before, or there's a, you know, the painting is talking to you as you're making the work, and so you're responding to what it's saying. And yes, it's gesture and color and shape and line, but there is a dialogue that's happening, and so you're in this kind of unspoken communication with a creative piece of work. It's like nothing else I've experienced, and so you're really in it, and you're pushing through into something. You discover something about yourself, and that for me is endlessly fascinating.
So how do you feel when you look at your work? So you're surrounded by it. How are you aiming to feel in a particular way, or how do you feel when you know a painting is just really said what you want it to say?
It's a bodily reaction of going, oh, literally I'm like, oh, that's it. And you didn't know what the it was, but when it's there, your body relaxes, and there's this or sometimes there's a moment of all my hairs stand up on my arm, and it's like, woof, something's just come through, and I feel that it's like anchoring a new frequency, or there's a, you know, because color is a frequency, it's a vibration, that, you know, there's a scientific wave that's measurable with each color, and so the combination of colors and composition, and then the aspect that was me that was creating it, is all encoded in a painting, which is why a print is just not the same as a real live painting that's kind of got my DNA in it, and the energetic snapshot in time of me creating that now. And so there's a bodily response that comes from standing in front of a painting. I mean, I have stood in front of a Rothko, and I literally was like, oh my God, I'm in the Tate, and I think I'm going to cry. You know, there's something about how the body responds to that frequency and intensity and the layers. And I'm not a scientist. I live on the intuitive side too much, but I know there's something going on, and I wish if anyone knows of scientific reports or
somebody will
going on, I'd love to know and read it, to sort of, I suppose, the rational side of my brain wants to know about that, but I know intuitively, absolutely, that there is something going on. And so that is the feedback when I'm standing in front of a piece of work. If I don't get that, isn't it, noise, then I've got to keep going.
Yeah. I noticed that you've done a couple of courses that caught my eye. One was the Newlyn School of Arts the mentoring program, and CVP, which I noticed, of course, as well, because I did it during lockdown as well. Yeah. So how I don't know if you were able to talk a little bit about both places, and why you went on them and what they gave you.
Yes, I did the Newlyn mentoring course when we first moved to Cornwall, which was 2016, so 4 years ago. And I actually got pregnant during that. So I was pregnant for most of the course, all of the course. And so I wasn't fully, you know, we moved our house and our farm to Cornwall, so it was kind of a full-on year. But having that structure was really helpful, not only for integrating into Cornwall and meeting artists, but to continue the conversation about artwork and showing your work. And they have some excellent teachers there who are involved with Falmouth University, and just the tradition of excellence of painting here in Cornwall, and drawing in all these different tutors. So it was wonderful to have access to them, and really, you know, they pushed me into thinking about work in a slightly different way. I created some mirror imaged paintings that were I was able to put onto aluminium. So I did this kind of you know, pushing out of painting into a different medium, which I then was able to exhibit through the connections that they had. So yeah, it was a really, really fantastic year of developing, you know, not just the creative side, because it wasn't really a studio practice, but it, you know, we would come together. It was, I mean, it was like a university course really condensed into a year, and I did their follow-on course as well. And then creative visionary programs, CVP with Nicholas Wilton. That was something very different, and I did that last year when I just realized I couldn't get out with a small child to do all these courses or take a whole week off or immerse myself in quite the same way. So this was an online course, which, as you know, with all the different modules, and being able to do it at your own pace was, you know, fantastic. And just changing the medium, then it was, you know, acrylic, and you're on these, working on these small panels, and just the, I think it's just having fresh input, and he's very encouraging, and there's a great deal of permission, isn't there, to just do.
It's great, really. I quite miss it. Tuning into that. Yeah.
So I did quite a lot of works on there, and then that kept me going. It was just having that structure to have to show up each week and keep up with the videos was.
So is that quite an important part of your practice of keeping on developing, of just sort of tuning into I don't know, into the artist space really with other artists like CVP and Newlyn?
It's always learning. You know, when you start to think you know it all, it's death really. You're always
it's true,
always learning, and you know, a community is also extremely important to be able to bounce off each other and share ideas and art supply sources and all the things that we do. So that was also very helpful, and also the international aspect I really enjoyed. I because I lived right in San Francisco, that I felt I had a connection with Sausalito and the area that he's from.
Wow.
And it just, again, gave me permission. In fact, I worked on a really, really large painting during that CVP process, which I then took a risk and sold to a collector that I used to know in the States, and was able to sell it over, you know, email and images and videos. And that was something I wouldn't have done if I'd just been playing it small and carrying on in my little studio, just keeping my head down and doing my work. So sometimes you need that push from outside to do something different, and that gave me that.
So how, I mean, moving on to galleries as well, how, I suppose you had a background as an art consultant, so maybe it was a little bit different for you, but I think a lot of artists finding that they're making that step to professional artist and approaching galleries are quite I don't know, sort of wonder how it's done really, I think. So how, have you got any advice for anybody wanting to do that, of how to approach galleries and how to know whether their work is a match? How did you manage that?
Yes, it's
where do you exhibit in galleries?
So I'll take the first question. So getting into a gallery is you need to do your homework, I would say. You need to know which galleries, you know, their style, because there's an aesthetic that the gallery directors will have, and so you need to know what kind of artists are showing. And if you really like those artists, then I would suggest reaching out to them. And you know, the internet's fantastic. You can direct message anybody through Instagram or Twitter, and you can find people and they will answer. You don't even have to email them, but you know, a formal kind of making connections, because I realized that all the galleries that I've worked with have all, you know, the introduction has been because I knew an artist that was already there. And that just means that when you email or when you contact them or when you show up in person, you say, oh, I know so-and-so, or they suggested that I contact you. So already they're going to look at your email and say, oh, okay. So they just give you an extra few moments. Now, if your work's not good enough or a fit or whatever the reason is, or if they've got somebody who's already filling that kind of aesthetic space in their gallery, they won't take you on. But they might take a couple of paintings for a group show. And you know, if you're easy to work with and you've got good images and you have your act together, and maybe they, a gallery, they do know what they can sell, and so don't take it personally when they don't take you on, because I know it's the hardest thing, because it's you've got to create the relationship. People, the galleries work with artists and their people, and that takes time to build up. It means showing up in person. It means talking to them. It means, dropping a few artist names when you talk to them and show that, asking intelligent questions about the other work that's on the wall, so that they know that you do have an eye and you know what you're talking about and you're bringing a certain perspective. And then, they will look at your website, and you do have to have a website these days so that it shows what you're capable of, what you're doing, and invite them to your studio. You have to take a risk at some point to, and it's hard because they're busy. They're really busy. And I know, because as an art consultant, I used to get hundreds and hundreds of artist submissions to people, because eventually I was representing artists, and you actually just physically can't get through it all. And it's hard I mean, now it's easier because people could go to a website and they have a quick look.
Right, so I thought it was lovely chatting to you, and I thought we'd end with a few shorts, if that's right.
Yes.
A few quick fire questions, just little arty questions. Are you ready?
Okay, ready.
Okay. So what's your favourite colour?
Coral pink. It's interesting to me what colours I do reach for in the depending on my emotional state or what I'm feeling in the world. But my real love is a kind of magenta pink, and also a kind of quite hard to find and to mix, a coral, but set against oranges and pinks. So that's the influence of India and that kind of joyous outward expression, which is free and very feminine and kind of living out loud. And I love, when that really starts to appear. In lockdown, it got quite heavy with the colder colours, with blues and blacks and darker burgundy colours. And I had to, I've still got a painting that it still needs to be significantly lightened. But
I wonder if a lot of artists actually found that their palette changed a bit. I don't know.
Yes, certainly the beginning was very dark. It was dark palettes for me, and then I would kind of push back out and try and there was a kind of breakthrough moment where things felt easier, and then I was able to go to brighter colours again. And I mean, I think you could see some on the easel at the moment, but there's that yellows and oranges and lime greens and a more tropical feeling. And actually I have now just finished a series of work that was really bright. So I decided that actually I really wanted to give myself permission to literally just do bright colours that were harmonious and a little bit of each colour in each one, so that it hangs together as a harmonious whole. But that was, I suppose escapism really is allowing the colours to express this kind of real need for, there are positive things happening despite these dreadful headlines and this persistent insistence that we all are in this fear-based place, which I absolutely refuse, because I just do not want to be, fear is a virus as far as I'm concerned, and it is contagious. And so just wanting to block that out and go, no, who I really am is not that. I am free and vibrant, and life runs through me, and this is my true self-expression.
Do you have a favourite painting tool or material, something that you cannot let go of in your studio?
Probably the end of a palette knife that's broken, and I turn it the other way and gouge marks, scratch into things with.
A bit like a chisel. Yeah. Do you like working on canvas or wood, like panels?
I'm enjoying panels a lot at the moment, but canvas still is easier to manage, and yeah, I'm a bit of a traditional.
A bounce. Big or small? I think I know the answer to that one. Sketchbook and planning, or go with the flow and intuitive?
Intuitive.
And are there any, this is not quite such a short question, maybe, or short answer. So when you're working, how do you know whether the marks you're making feel really authentic to you, or is that never really a problem? I don't know. What kind of marks do you particularly love making? Is there anything that you love doing? And I don't mean particularly putting colour on, just gestural marks, anything like that.
I mean, there's a kind of a loop and a hoop and a circle that has been persistent. Yeah. And there was the upturned V for a while, grounded within a landscape and a horizon line. Those things, that was from a certain body of work I did in 2012, when I realized I was kind of painting this womb type shape. So those, and that developed into what I call the union series, of this union of masculine and feminine, and they were symbols that had more meaning to me. So yes, I find those still do exist, and they're an unconscious expression. I find they may go into the painting and they may be covered up later, or they may not.
And lastly, what do you want the viewer to see, or what do you hope the viewer will see when they look at your work, or what do you hope they will feel?
What do I hope they will feel? I would hope my paintings give access to a wider realm of being that's beyond our kind of logical, rational minds. So the bodily response to colour and shape and composition, and the frequencies we talked about, that are, I would hope that it starts is a gateway or an access point into this, the other aspects of who we are as extraordinary human beings, that that place of not knowing, or that place of knowing through intuition. And so kind of a gateway into another realm that is a state of being, a feeling, an emotion, more, in a more ethereal, spiritual, even dreamlike state. These wider states of who we are as beings, that isn't just confined to a body. So this ability to know everything without being told, and if we can really still access that, because I think a lot of our training and upbringing and education in society knocks that out of us, but when we still can trust our inner knowing, that's the place I paint from, and that's what I would hope people are able to kind of connect with when they do see and experience my paintings.
Wow. And is there anything else that you'd like to add? Where can people see your work? Apart from Instagram, obviously. Yeah.
Yes, Instagram, I'm at Trudy Monty, and my website is trudymontgomery.com.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for talking about your work, and it's been fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you very much.